Right, well, I promised I would talk about my 12-volt solar system, and in particular to a friend of mine, Richard, who's planning on fitting solar to his shed. But what I would say is it depends what you want to power in your shed. You know, if you're using things that are a couple of kilowatt each, you're going to need some big batteries and you're going to need some big panels. But if it's just your lighting and perhaps the occasional use of a drill, something like that, yeah, this sort of setup would work. What I've got is I've got four 250 watt panels in the garden, which I didn't pay a lot for. I think they were about £60 each. Facebook Marketplace, that's where I got those. They are all chained together, and coming through this cable from the panels, which are down the garden, is around 19 volts. It comes into this solar charge controller. These start from as little as £10, but it's all about how much wattage you're going to draw on it. So this particular one cost me 80, but it's capable of 50 watts, which is quite a bit. The cheaper ones, you can pick them up for about £10, something like that, if you just want to dabble in solar and you're not going to run an awful lot. You certainly run lights on, that sort of thing. So the solar panels come into this unit, and this unit then is hooked up to these batteries down here. I've got 3 big truck batteries. I bought them all brand new. They're all matching. It came to about 180, something like that. So it's charging the batteries. It also has a 12-volt output on here, but I don't actually use that. I power everything direct from the batteries. So all my lighting runs on 12 volt, or quite a lot of it. You know, I pulled up floorboards and just rewired them to run on 12 volt instead of 240 volt with sensors, so I don't even have to switch them on. If you walk into the room, they'll just come on. If you walk out, they'll go off. Yeah, they do come on in the day, but you know, it's drawing so little, it really doesn't matter. The second thing I've got is an inverter, and what this does is convert 12 volt to 240 volt. It's going to be a little bit noisy because it's got a fan in it. And there's nothing being drawn on at the moment, but you got 250 volts out of that. It's a nice sunny day today after all the rain that we've had, and generally if it's during the day, I plug my kettle into this because, you know, they use, I don't know, 1500 2 kilowatt, aren't they, kettles, so they draw quite a bit. Anything that gets hot in the house, and that includes tumble dryers and washing machines, kettles, irons, they cost you money. They're the things that are running your electric bill up. So where possible, I try and run it on the inverter. I don't generally run the washing machine because it's on for a long period of time. It'd have to be an exceedingly sunny day to do that, but I have done it. I have run the washing machine off it. So that's the second thing, is the inverter. So I have got a 12 volt feed, and anything that will run on 12 volt I can plug it into this. And I've also got an inverter. Again, this was quite expensive. Some of the things you buy in solar, it really isn't worth buying the cheapest thing, because in the longer run, the ones that cost that little bit more will last longer and greater capacity, and you're not going to burn them out. Very important with an inverter to have very thick cables coming from the batteries, because, you know, if you've got a kettle plugged into it, you know, it's a lot of wattage, so you need nice big thick cables. The charging side of it, they can be quite thin because, you know, it's low current really. So that is how my solar setup works, and my solar panels are not on the roof. They just stand up in the garden, but they've got line of sight to the sun, and that's all you need. With calculating solar, well, there's lots of maths and equations you can do, but what you really want to do is, if you're going to put them in the garden, is look at what part of the garden gets the most sun all day, and that's where you put your panels. And if you don't have an area like that, then it may not work for you, unless you can put them on a shed facing the sun for the greater part of the day. So that is my solar setup. Nothing overly complex once you start connecting to it. It's always red to red, black to black with almost everything. Secondly, today's acquisition is an UPS, or a UPS, and for those not familiar with a UPS unit, well, for those that are, I'm going to be telling you to suck eggs, but for those that don't know what they are, basically this plugs into the mains, and it's got outlets on it for 240 volt equipment. If the mains loses all power, this will run from anywhere between 15 minutes and possibly an hour, depending on what you've got it plugged into. They are primarily meant for computer servers, where if the power goes, it maintains power to it, or if you get a sudden drop and then it comes back on again, this will kick in. That's what's called an uninterruptible power supply. But you could, though perhaps not a most efficient way of doing it, you could plug your freezer into this, for instance. If the power went to your freezer, well, it would run for a considerable amount of time, because freezers, when they're shut, don't draw a lot, in all honesty. But I'm going to modify this so it's also got a 12 volt output. And I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to combine this in some way with the solar setup. And now I know all the components that I've got another unit that I've got to put in. What that does is, if you're powering things off the inverter, in other words you're drawing 240 volts off a 12 volt system, when these batteries start to fall below a certain level, this new unit will go ka-chunk, and it switches it back to mains. So in a sense it's virtually an automated solar system. In the height of the summer, it'll just do all the work for you, and you haven't got to think about it. And as I say, I haven't got to get guys out with scaffolding on my roof to put my solar panels in. You don't need to do that. The cost for this was well under £1,000. It was 850, and I would say I've got my money back within 2 years. Whereas if you've got solar panels on a roof, it could be where you may never get your money back, in all honesty, depending on what kind of system it is. But you know, those ones where, say, companies come in and fit it all, yeah, they're good, but you will pay a lot of money for it, and you've got to seriously think, will I ever earn that back? But that's essentially it. You need a solar panel, you need an inverter. I was thinking really of Richard with his very simple setup in a shed. No, sorry, he doesn't need an inverter. He doesn't need that. Well, he could, I suppose, if you've got big enough solar panels. But if you're just running the lights in your shed, you just need your solar panels and you know, a solar regulator like that will just keep trickle charging the batteries and keeping them topped up. But that's it. And this is my untidy part of the kitchen, because the kitchen's the last thing we're touching in this house. We've got so many other things to do. But once I've got the other unit worked out where I'm going to place it, I'm going to put the whole lot in a cupboard, so it'll all tidy up. All the cables will be tidied up with correct fuses, that sort of stuff. And the batteries, they're fine, they can just sit on the floor, but I say again, they'll be boxed in, so it should all work very well. So that is the solar setup. As I say, I can run my fridge freezer off that, no problem, all night it'll run on that. And height of the day, I can run my kettle on it, and I've got a 200 watt Chinese cooker, which I'm really impressed with. And it's portable. It's a great little thing. You put all your ingredients in it in the morning, go to work, plug it in, sort of half an hour, dinner's cooked right through. They're great, and they're only 200 watts. So you know, my son and I, we can cook a meal on that during the day and use no mains power at all. So worth considering. So a lot of people are saying, well, it's no good in Britain, you don't get the sun. We do, and as has been proved, I've run all of my lights all through the winter on my solar setup. And you know, it may not have been putting a massive charge into my batteries, but it was enough to run the lights. Today's been particularly sunny, got 14.3 volts. Those batteries must be close to fully charged now, at which point that 14.3 will drop down to about 12.6, because it doesn't need to charge them anymore. Lots of menus and things that you can go through, and this is actually Wi-Fi, so I could, I've never bothered, hook it up to my phone, you know, and gesticulate over all the readings. I don't want to do that. I want something that runs pretty well automated and I haven't got to worry about it. Important to have everything fused. You know, you don't want to fire, but other than that, yeah, setting up solar at home, fairly straightforward. So there you go, that's my solar system. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.